The National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. has reopened after a breathtaking top-to-bottom renovation. And we're celebrating the voices and achievements of women artists from around the world. Visit now to see Suchitra Matai, Myth from Matter, a new exhibition of richly layered and vibrant paintings, sculptures, and installations that use saris, vintage needlepoints, jewelry, and bindis to imagine a past that lifts up women and people of color. Tickets at nmwa.org. That's nmwa.org.
Today on CityCast DC, we are talking about a perfect storm threatening affordable housing in DC, as well as whether they ought to make builders noise-proof new buildings. Plus, we have some thoughts about Washington's newest sports icon. I'm here with the Washington Post's Aaron Weiner and my CityCast colleague, Ash Durbin. Today is Friday, September 27th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Mike. How's it going?
Good to see you, man.
Likewise.
Hey, Ash.
Hey, morning.
Hey, so Aaron, this is my first time talking with you on this pod. Thankfully, not my first time talking with you ever. But I've never asked you, are you a member of CityCast?
I definitely was. I can't honestly tell you if I still am.
Ash, tell him what he would get if he were.
Yeah, so as a member, you get to see our weekly list of events early. So the email goes out every Monday afternoon, so you can plan your week ahead of time. You also get first dibs on events and special episodes and stuff like that. You can sign up for as little as $8 a month at membership.citycast.fm.
And just for the record, I am a subscriber to the Washington Post, which is how, Aaron, I got to read your pretty banging piece this week. Banging's maybe the wrong word because it's actually pretty grim. But, you know, we perpetually hear promises of we're going to build lots and lots and lots of more housing that non-rich people can afford. And all those efforts seem to be really at risk. What is going on?
Yeah. Well, let me say off the top, we talk all the time about housing affordability in DC and how unaffordable the city's gotten. And that crisis is very real and very ongoing. This is kind of distinct from that, and in a lot of ways more acute and more dire. This is a crisis in dedicated affordable housing, which is to say privately owned housing that is limited to people making under certain income levels.
What are those income levels?
Well, it varies by project. There are some that are limited to people making under 30% of area median income or 50 or 60 or 80, but there are 97,000 DC residents who rely on this type of housing, and the whole sector is basically at risk of crumbling right now.
That's like 1 out of 7 DC residents.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
So there are these funds where taxpayer help is given to private sector developers who want to build this kind of stuff. What's going on? Why is it not doing the trick?
Yeah, so people have described this as a perfect storm. This is one of these weird situations where 5 different people I talk to use the same term to describe it, which tells you something. There are a bunch of different factors that are coming together here. Any one of those, would be a problem in its own right, but coming together, it really makes for a disaster. So one of the big things is coming out of the pandemic. During the pandemic, we created these generous programs to help people stay in their homes. Cities across the country did this. We had an eviction moratorium. We had an emergency rental assistance program that was very lenient, so people didn't have to try to, go rush and find documents when everything was shut down. But we kept those programs in place longer than a lot of other cities did. And what housing providers say now is they're just dealing with this situation where, as many as 40% of people in their properties are not paying rent, and so they can't make ends meet.
Is that housing providers means landlords?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what landlords like to be called because nobody likes their landlord.
They're landlords to me.
Yeah. And then you also mentioned the Housing Production Trust Fund, right? So this is the city's main vehicle for subsidizing affordable housing in the city. It's been Mayor Bowser's signature program. She put $100 million into it when she came into office. She's increased that amount since then. She talks about it all the time. But this year, not only is there less money, but the city is so worried about the existing affordable housing falling into foreclosure that they made this pretty shocking change, which is that they're not providing any funds for new affordable housing this year. So you've got kind of two things going on together. One is that the existing affordable housing is in real trouble, and the other is that there's not any new stuff that's going to be built. And so come 2 or 3 years from now, there's not going to be new affordable housing coming online, and we could end up with a real shortage.
Wait, so let me just see if I understand this. A bunch of people are delinquent in their rent, and it is harder than it used to be to toss them out or otherwise like threaten them into paying, which has to be a pretty constant thing in low-income housing. Because of this, a lot of these companies are in deep trouble and might themselves not survive or might lose the properties to foreclosure. The mayor, the city has decided, instead of taking this trust fund money and putting it to building new stuff, we got to shore up these companies, because if they go under, then it's really, really, really trouble for the people who are currently living in them.
Yeah, that's right. And there are a few other factors as well. I mean, obviously, high inflation makes things harder for everyone. Insurance costs are super high. Security and maintenance costs have gotten higher. But if we want to get wonky about it, there's this thing called ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This is kind of what the city is targeting right now and talking about trying to take the first step toward reform. Right now, people can self-certify their need for this program. They can say, I'm having trouble paying my rent. They don't have to provide any documentation. And as long as they have an application pending, regardless of whether or not it's ultimately approved, any eviction proceeding against them is paused. And so there are people who, can kind of drag this out for 2+ years, and the landlords aren't collecting rent. And the city really prides itself on being tenant friendly. And I think progressive people in the city don't want to change that. But a lot of people are saying now, man, maybe this has gone a little too far.
Speaking of wonkiness, I saw in your article a mention of TOPA, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. Can you talk about how that plays into this as well? Because I'm always interested to hear about that.
Yeah, totally. So TOPA is this kind of special DC law that gives tenants the right to purchase their building if it's being sold, right? They have a chance to kind of match the offer. The way that it's really used more often than anything else, especially in these larger low-income apartment buildings, is that if a building goes up for sale, the tenants can partner with a development partner, a developer that that specializes in affordable housing often, to put together a bid, and the developer makes certain promises to the tenants. We're going to keep the building affordable. We're going to make these repairs. They can use TOPA as leverage to kind of make sure that the building stays affordable and gets to be in better shape. But that only works if there's actually competition to buy these buildings. And right now, no one has the money to buy these buildings. And so what you end up with is not only do tenants not get to achieve these better things, they're stuck in these buildings that the current landlord can't really afford to keep up, and no one else can afford to come in and buy them. And so they just are kind of left to deteriorate.
And the reason nobody wants to buy them is because the landlords think they won't make any money from this investment.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of investment money is fleeing from DC because these problems really are unique to DC. There's a version of it that happens elsewhere, but what the housing providers or landlords will tell you is that DC, its policies are set up in such a way that rent delinquency is just way higher here than in Maryland. Like, I talked to one housing provider who said that the amount of unpaid rent owed at her DC properties is 75% higher than at the properties just a couple of miles away over the Maryland border.
Did they say anything about like what percent of their tenants are behind?
Yeah, it varies. At some buildings, it's as high as 40%, I've heard.
And like in this I don't know anything about this business, but like how month to month are their cash flow needs? Which is to say, like, if 40% of your people aren't paying on any given month, how hosed are you in terms of like paying back your loans or dealing with maintenance or whatever it is that the expenses are?
Yeah, I mean, these are typically not high margin businesses. We're not talking about the super high end, glassy condo towers, right? These are, for the most part, developers that are focused on. About half of them are nonprofits themselves, right? So they're not even making a profit. And the other half are for-profit ones who do specialize in or do some work on affordable housing. I talked to the president of one development company where the principals of the company invested $4 million of their own money just to tide them over to avoid having the properties really fall apart. And the guy was like, yeah, this will get us through the next few months. After that, who knows?
Right. So this is kind of focused on low-income affordable housing, like you said. Will this have an effect on like the wider market in general?
Probably not a direct effect. I mean, we're in this kind of unfortunate position in DC where market rent housing, for the most part, has gotten so expensive that there's like kind of a wide chasm between the low-income housing and market rent. The concern that a lot of people have is that It's not that these people are going to be displaced from these buildings and compete for market rent properties. It's going to be that they just have to leave the city altogether because there's nothing they can afford.
But wait, if these buildings, like say some low income, privately owned building that is quote unquote affordable housing, the building goes into foreclosure, the company goes under, whatever. Like what happens? Do they shut the building and throw everyone out, or does someone else take it over?
Yeah. So if it goes into foreclosure, right, then the bank owns it. The biggest problem right then is that the affordability covenant on the building is lost. And that's basically the fine print that says that the units in the building have to remain affordable. So if it falls into foreclosure, that disappears. And if the building, especially if it's in a part of the city where there's developer interest, where the housing market is strong, that's going to get bought up by a developer who's going to turn it into market rate housing, and those low income units have gone away forever. There's not a lot of housing investment happening overall right now. It might not be that it gets snatched up right away and turned into fancy condos, but as interest rates start to come down as time passes, the concern is that the overall trend would be that this housing gets lost as affordable housing.
Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for district residents. They make recycling leftover paint, stain, and varnish easy with convenient drop-off locations like your local paint or hardware store. Each new paint project is an opportunity to reduce waste, and Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter. 1. Buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2. Use up leftover paint. And 3. Recycle the rest. Visit paintcare.org/3simplerules to get tips on how to buy the right amount of paint, explore ideas for DIY projects for how to use up leftover paint, and look up your nearest drop-off site in the district. The National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. has reopened after a breathtaking top-to-bottom renovation. And we're celebrating the voices and achievements of women artists from around the world. Visit now to see Suchitra Matai, Myth from Matter, a new exhibition of richly layered and vibrant paintings, sculptures, and installations that use saris, vintage needlepoints, jewelry, and bindis to imagine a past that lifts up women and people of color. Tickets at nmwa.org. That's nmwa.org.
All right, so you guys, I was actually, this is sort of a related subject, but I was really interested in this story this week about there's a new bill in the council that would, in certain high density, entertainment heavy parts of the city, require people who build new buildings to soundproof those buildings for the sake of the residents who are being, like in Columbia Heights, menaced by street preachers or other bits of noise. And on one hand, this seems like a completely reasonable thing because you talk to people. We did that episode about the busker by Capital One Arena. People are really driven to distraction by this kind of thing. On the other hand, you just said, Aaron, that there's not that much investment going into housing in DC, not just low income, but any. And it's expensive to build here and it's expensive to rent or buy here. And when you require anything new, when you add any new obligation for someone building a building, that pushes the price up. And it's like these 2 different sort of conversations go on at the same time. And I feel like DC rarely kind of connects them. That on the one hand, there's a conversation about we got to do this, et cetera, to make people's quality of life better in buildings. And on the other hand, it's everything's expensive. Can anyone afford to live here? It's a pity, but those 2 things are connected.
Totally. I mean, I think this is a conversation too that comes up, especially in progressive-minded communities like DC and like some of the DC suburbs. There's a tension between the things that people want to do in their housing and the need for more housing, right? So progressive people want green buildings. Progressive people want, EV charging in their buildings. Whatever it is, that's great. But if it adds so much cost that it makes it harder to build housing at all, then you end up with less housing overall. And I think that's a dilemma that a lot of cities, including DC, are still trying to figure out, including with an issue like this.
And this has become an issue in the presidential election too, cost of housing. And it's one that basically the blue places, the economically vibrant blue places, which include, thank goodness, the DC area, but they've tended to become so hard to afford that you see this tremendous population growth in Texas and stuff, where it's just an awful lot cheaper to live. It's an awful lot cheaper to build new stuff for a whole bunch of reasons. But the reasons we've talked about on this pod a bunch around zoning and regulations, cost of building stuff. And in the long run, it's a thing people are talking about here because it represents sort of a danger for places like DC in the long run.
Totally. And, we're straying a little from soundproofing here, but people are starting to recognize that this is a problem, right? Like in Arlington, they adopted this bill to create missing middle housing, as they call it, right? Duplexes and triplexes in single family neighborhoods. They're fighting over the same thing in Montgomery County right now. DC, for all the affordability problems we're talking about, has actually done better than just about any peer city or anywhere else in the region in terms of building new housing. So there is maybe progress happening, but you're right. It's still obviously very expensive to live here compared to the places in the Sun Belt that people are moving to.
Wait, so just to clarify, is the goal here kind of like to appease the people who complain about buskers or loud music outside or whatever, and then also trying to take into account just the overall goal of not trying to criminalize people who are just making music on the street or whatever? Is it trying to solve both those problems? Is that the goal of this?
That's one of the things she's said, is to sort of blend the history with people's needs. But that kind of drives me nuts that we as a society are so incapable of talking about, noise complaints without it descending into animus, that we have to fix it with infrastructure rather than just sort of finding a way to be cool about, one person being whiny and another person being noisy.
But this is what cities are all about, right? It's you bring a whole bunch of different people together. You're not trying to shut people up. Some people are really into the street preachers, presumably, and there are other people who think that the Spanish language Jesus gospel maybe is not for them. And, likewise in Chinatown, and likewise anywhere you have all this noise. And so, I think this is kind of what cities are all about, is finding ways to live together, allow a degree of freedom, and also let people sleep at night. And striking that balance is hard.
Yes, I think you're completely right. And that's the cultural issue at the heart of this. You could also say, maybe it also should be that city officials and elected officials ought to be willing to take the crap that comes their way if they take a side in an issue that inflames their constituents.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I've got some exciting news for you theater lovers across DC. The Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University is going big to celebrate 1 year of performances at the Bloomberg Center, DC's newest venue for music and dance. They're putting on a bunch of free shows this fall. I'm talking orchestra, jazz, and opera performances, all presented by talented Peabody faculty, students, and alumni. So for example, at the end of September, I'm really excited about the Polyaspora Festival, which centers Black and Brazilian perspectives in contemporary music. Or in October, there's the Democracy Day show. It's all happening at 555 Pennsylvania Avenue. And again, believe it or not, this is all free. But tickets are required, so explore the full concert calendar and reserve your spots now at washingtondc.jhu.edu.
So lately, the weather in DC has been downright wacky sometimes. Tornadoes, crazy flooding, bad air quality, so much of it feels out of control. But I recently learned that September is National Preparedness Month, and it is a good reminder to make your emergency plan if you haven't yet. The yearly preparedness campaign was started by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and they have a bunch of tips on their website to get you started. It's ready.dc.gov/NPM2024. One of the best ways to prepare is to make sure you have a way of staying informed, not just by listening to CityCast DC. Sign up for free email or text alerts from district officials on weather, traffic, public safety, and more by visiting alert.dc.gov. Another tip, build your emergency kit over time. Purchase one extra item each time you shop. A checklist is available at ready.dc.gov/kit. Take time now to prepare because later is too late. Everything you need is at ready.dc.gov. All right, well, so one issue that is not currently dividing Washington, first time in many, many years. Washington has a history of falling in love with its football quarterbacks, and there was the Commanders. For people who don't know, they won a big upset against Cincinnati on Monday night. Jaden Daniels, their new quarterback, rookie, had an amazing game, and you can almost feel the like civic hype, hero worship machine gearing up. So here, as our public service, to make you a more connected Washingtonian, Ash is going to tell us some stuff that we ought to know about Jaden Daniels in order to engage in / backlash against this hero worship.
Well, first of all, like, do you guys like football?
I do. I mean, it's caused me a lot more pain than joy, but yeah, in principle, I like it.
Cool. I'm like a watch the Super Bowl guy generally, but the one year that I ever did watch the Commanders frequently was in 2012 during RG3's rookie year. And I just remember the hype around that. And like, I was in school at the time and everybody was super excited every Monday. And, you know, it's only 3 games into the season, but I think we can kind of feel that kind of energy coming back. And it's like, I think the fact that I'm watching it kind of says, you know, as someone who doesn't really watch football, that there is an energy behind it. And like after game 3, he had 91.3 completion percentage off 23 attempts. It's an NFL rookie record. So yeah, I think there's something about a quarterback in America, in the NFL, that can like really energize the city. And I don't think it's like, from my understanding, it's like could still be a stretch to make the playoffs, but like in just the terrible realm of Washington sports over the past forever, like just a little nugget of something great is all kind of we need to get excited now, you know?
The other lesson of RG3, of course, is let's not jinx ourselves.
Yes.
This guy was the greatest. He carried the hope of the city on his shoulders and on his knee, and then his knee gave out, and then that was the end. So I feel like, you know, we owe it to Jaden Daniels to all pull in together and buy him a really good knee brace.
Yep.
And also lower our collective expectations. But, you know, the threshold that he has to clear is very low. This is not a city that has had a lot of pride and excitement in its football team in quite some time. And if he can deliver even some portion of what he's been showing us so far, I think people will be pretty excited.
And look, it's been a long time. So I think a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of transients in Washington, don't have any memory of when the football team was a sort of cultural touchstone. It was like one of the few things that you could talk about, you know, city and suburbanite, rich person and not rich person. And, you know, I think it'll be an interesting experiment. Like, let's say, hypothetically, and probably unlikely, that they get really good and that nothing crushes the dreams of Jaden Daniels. Things have changed a lot since the last time there was a good NFL team here, which is like the 80s. It used to be, you know, if you moved from most places, it was pretty hard to keep watching your native team. And so you transferred your loyalties to wherever you moved to. And, you know, you don't have to do that anymore. Now, if the team is good, maybe we will do it anyway. But I'm sort of interested to see how that works in the event they get good or stay good.
Yeah, and the other big change is this. I mean, look, the diehard fans will always be the diehard fans, but for a lot of these newcomers, you know, for the past 10 plus years, people have been really conflicted about rooting for this team. The team had a name a lot of people found offensive. The team had an owner a lot of people hated. And both of those things have changed now. And so, you know, I feel like the team kind of has a blank slate. And people who are moving to the city or have moved to the city recently and are getting interested in football, you know, a lot of them feel like they can root for this team without any conflict now. And if they have a great quarterback and actually win some games, cool, that's a good combination.
Wait, so do you guys think that Jaden Daniels, and if he has success, could actually wind up costing taxpayers the cost of a new stadium or whatever it is they want to help them build that thing?
It's ultimately, I think if they're going to do it, they're going to do it regardless if the Commanders are good or if they suck. But I don't think it would hurt that cause if they were good.
But maybe the stadium gets that much more expensive, right? The public subsidy goes up by that many millions of dollars.
I mean, I guess like the thing, if you're trying to like hit up the public for subsidies for a stadium, you kind of win either way. Like if if the team is awesome and everyone, Jaden Daniels is our new civic hero, then you'll say like, oh, we all love the team. We got to shell out for a stadium. And if they stink and they need to go get another new quarterback, you can say like, well, the reason we can't afford new quarterbacks is because we have a crappy stadium.
Yeah, well, or they're briefly good. They spend way too much money on a stadium. By the time it's built, the team is terrible again, and everyone's forgotten about that little glimmer of excitement.
You may have just looked into the crystal ball.
Oh, we never forget, though we forgive. All right, so guys, before we go, as you, I'm sure, have been noting all month, this is National Preparedness Month, and we have been mentioning it every Friday. And that's because we have a tip from our sponsor, which is DC's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. Today's tip: you should sign up now for Alert DC. It's your real-time connection to critical updates from district officials during an emergency. Stay informed with free email and text alerts. Sign up at alert.dc.gov. That said, one thing you don't have to prepare for is Art All Night. It's tonight, and we will be there at the corner of Mount Pleasant and Lamont.
Come say hi.
Aaron, awesome to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Ash, good to see you, man.
Later.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, Ash Durbin, and Zoe Culkin. Newsletter editor Kayla Cote-Stemmerman wrote our fabulous newsletter Hey DC this week, and our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, why not shout about it on a street corner? And maybe someone will hear you through their soundproofed door. You can also come to Art All Night and tell us in person. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.